So today we welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series Shannon Kobran. Shannon is the Head of Education and Training for the SDG Academy, the flagship education initiative of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Shannon has been with the SDG Academy since 2018, when she joined as an education manager in SDSN's New York office. In 2021, she moved to Malaysia to establish an SDG Academy team in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Prior to joining the SDSN, Shannon has worked with the UN Development Program, UNDP, evaluating and revising the pilot of UNDP's award-winning Leadership Development Pathway, an online training program aimed at improving the performance of UNDP managers worldwide. Before transitioning into the international development space, Shannon spent 5 years as an editor and project manager for a leading educational publishing house, and she holds a master's degree in international education development from Teachers College, Columbia University in the United States, where her research focused on the intersection of technology and intercultural education. So Shannon, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you have an extensive background ranging from commitment to the SDG Academy, then also editor and working with the training. So I'm very curious and also interested in intersection of technology and intercultural education that is very current, actually. It's a very interesting conversation we're going to have here with you. Let me ask you first question, a straightforward question. And the question is, as the head of education and training for the SDG Academy, how would you define global citizenship and global citizenship education?
So I think my personal definition of global citizenship and global citizenship education has certainly evolved over time, especially as you've said, I've had kind of a varied career up until now. But initially, when I was first thinking about entering the international and global education space, I was really focused on cross-cultural learning and cross-cultural generating cross-cultural understanding, and that's really what drew me to my master's program and the work I did with my master's thesis on virtual exchange programs, so that intersection between cross-cultural learning and technology. But what I think I came to understand during those years and through the process, and certainly since I left my master's program, is that cross-cultural learning is only one aspect of what it means to be a global citizen and what it means to engage in global citizenship education. I think what I have come to understand about global citizenship and global citizenship education is it's less about learning what's going on with other people in the rest of the world and more about understanding your place in the wider world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So while it's important to learn about different cultures and people with different backgrounds, I think it is perhaps more so. I think it is perhaps more important to understand how you, just living your daily life wherever you are, engage and relate to other things happening in the world. And you have to think about the interconnected nature of the world that we live in today, whether it's through your consumption habits and supply chains, or through the media that you consume or produce, all of these things that connect you to the rest of the world in ways that you might not even think about. Yeah, so that's what I think.
So yes,
means,
I agree. Yeah. I mean, there is a really, as a starting point, a reflection, an inner reflection that is characterizing all this discussion of being a global citizen and global citizenship education. It's real. I mean, it starts from within, and I'm curious to learn from you some of the examples. First of all, what is the SDG Academy? Because I believe people who are following the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series are both educators, but also practitioners. Not everyone knows the important work you're doing. So the question is, what is the SDG Academy? And also, if you could offer a brief example of how the SDG Academy is involved with this discussion on global citizenship education.
Yeah, so as you've already mentioned, the SDG Academy is the flagship education initiative of an organization called the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So the SDSN. And SDSN at its core is a network of universities and research institutions around the world that are working to find solutions to sustainable development problems in service of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. So that's at its core what SDSN does. But we realized early on that we don't want all of this knowledge that's being generated to stay in the ivory tower or in the silo of academia, that really all of this best practice and expertise needs to be shared with the people who have to do the work of sustainable development. So in the beginning, we were really thinking about people working in policymaking, people working in governments. Those are sort of the core people that are responsible for carrying out a government's commitment to the SDGs. So, you know, your government says, let's do the SDGs. We have to meet our commitments to the Paris Climate Agreement. And then some guy sitting in the Ministry of Environment or in a Ministry of Education somewhere has to figure out what that means at the local level and what that means for policy and implementation. So that's really what we were thinking when we first started the SDG Academy is we have all these amazing experts in our network. Let's create free online educational resources to share that expertise with the world. And increasingly, we're not just reaching people in government and policymaking positions, we're reaching academics who want to better understand the full picture of what sustainable development is and what is going on around the world. Students, people in the private sector increasingly that are working on transforming into like people in the private sector who are trying to meet ESG requirements or better understand how sustainability and sustainable development fit into the business sector. General concerned citizens who want to better understand these topics. So really what we do is we make free online courses and other educational resources with the experts that we have at our disposal to help you and anyone you know learn about the SDGs, climate change, human rights.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about global citizenship education as an umbrella term, of course, bridging human rights education, peace education. That's perhaps a very interesting approach or vision about global citizenship education as an umbrella term. I was curious to know, on the one hand, if you can offer a brief example that is particularly relevant based on your experiences on how the initiatives that you're advancing as SDG Academy then contributed to fostering the so-called global citizen, so individuals who potentially contribute to the common good.
Yeah, back to what I said about my own evolving understanding of what it means to be a global citizen is about understanding your interconnectedness with the rest of the world. And I think that is at its heart what sustainable development is asking for. It's asking us to all understand how what we do or don't do affects everyone and everything around us. So kind of in the spirit of global citizenship, I think that people who take our online courses or reference any of the materials we create can understand the bigger picture. And even if you're taking our online course on climate change science, you're going to understand the climate change. You're going to understand the science behind climate change, but you're also going to understand the policy implications of that science. You're going to understand, the business opportunities for creating carbon capture technology. You're going to understand the way that climate change affects society and how different elements of society can be part of the solution. So it's not just about understanding the pure science, it's about understanding how that interacts with every other aspect. And I could say the same for our courses on human rights. We did a wonderful course on intangible cultural heritage and its implications for sustainable development with a team at UNESCO. So really looking at the big picture of all of these elements, how they all fit into the wider conversation, and then understanding how it all works together.
And perhaps when we publish your interview, we could also include some of the links to these online courses so that people can take a look and access. And
I can send you all sorts of links. Yeah.
Absolutely. That would be very interesting to our audience. And in relation to what you just said, I received this lovely invitation for your EASD for 2030 regional meeting on transforming the futures of education. And this is happening in July, so very soon. Why is the event important, and what are 2 or 3 core characteristics of this event?
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, UNESCO launched what they call ESDNet. So this is an initiative and a network that is supposed to help countries develop plans for implementing education for sustainable development and all of its constituent parts, global citizenship education and human rights education, all of the related fields, into its national education policies. So last year in 2023, they held a series of regional meetings to sort of really bring this home at the regional level and have in-depth conversations with delegates. So this would be ministry officials or people from the UNESCO National Commissions and other major stakeholders in education from these various countries to figure out, okay, what does this mean in our country and our region? So they had these regional meetings, and I was lucky enough to attend the Asia Pacific regional meeting in Bali last year. And following up on that, later that year, they had a global meeting, which took place in Tokyo. And at that meeting, we said we really should do a follow-up, and we offered to host that meeting here in Kuala Lumpur in partnership with UNESCO. So that's sort of how this all came about. So the meeting that we are hosting it's a continuation of that same conversation. And it's an opportunity to continue to keep the spotlight on education and sustainable development and transforming education policy and practice, really looking at how we can do that in the region so we can reference best practices from around the world, and then also have a spotlight on what does it mean for the Asia Pacific? What are the particular opportunities and challenges in this region? Can we learn from each other? So we're primarily going to be talking about policy, obviously. But I think we're all familiar that policy can be wonderful, but it's implementation that matters the most. So the policy, teacher training, looking at curriculum and lesson planning, and also assessments, and how do you transform assessment structures to benefit sustainable development education.
Interesting. And so I want to ask you a final question. It's a challenging one, and all my international guests here would try their best to really address this question. And the question is, how would you define global citizenship education in 3 keywords, and why these 3 keywords?
You've had Bill Godelli on your
yes, absolutely. Okay. That was one of the first participants in our global citizenship education interview series, and it was a pleasure and very interesting discussion.
So when you first posed this question to me, the first thought I had was the 3 words I would use to describe global citizenship education are global citizenship and education, which sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I can explain. I come to this conclusion.
This is new.
Yeah. So when I was doing my master's degree at Teachers College, I took a class with Bill Godelli, who I know you've had in your series. He taught a class on global citizenship education, and the way that he really broke down the idea of global citizenship education was with those 3 words. We had to really think about, what do we mean by global, what do we mean by citizenship, and what do we mean by education?
Absolutely.
So, and this is really where I started thinking critically about what my personal definition of global citizenship was, and how I really came to transform my thinking from thinking outward to the rest of the world to thinking inward about what is my relationship to the rest of the world and who I am in the world. So when we thought about global, it was not just about, different cultures or ways of living, but really about the interconnectedness of everything. So we really looked at, like I said, supply chains, we looked at media, everything that connects us, whether we realize it or not. So that's really what global came to mean for us.
Absolutely.
Citizenship was, we were thinking about it in terms of your legal rights as a person who lives in a country, and then you have a passport, you pay taxes, but also what benefits do you get from being a citizen of a particular country? And then if you want to think of that at a global scale, what would that mean? What responsibilities do you have to the globe and everyone on it? And what responsibilities or what can you get back from the rest of the world as a citizen of the world? So that was what we thought about in terms of what citizenship meant. And then education was about how do you teach and learn these things, and what is the ongoing process of continually learning and reassessing your relationship to the world and how you interact with it.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Education.
So yes, there is a connection between these three keywords, and of course, as related to this increasing understanding that we are all interconnected. But then when it comes to citizenship, there is an ongoing discussion on this because it's not easy to define. So it's a very interesting conversation with Shannon, who is the head of education and training for the SDG Academy. Thank you for joining the Global Citizenship Education Interview Series.
Thank you so much for having me.